Madam Chair, we're live.
Thank you. This meeting is called to order. Today is May 14th and the time is 5:16 p.m. I'm calling to order the Baldwin Park Stakeholders Oversight Committee regular meeting. Pastor Jackson, can you please lead us in an invocation?
Heavenly Father, we come before you right now in the name of the Lord. You said to acknowledge you in all of our ways and you would direct our path. And this is what we need, Heavenly Father. We need your divine direction and the decisions that we make, Lord, that it not be of our own, Lord, but the decisions that we make will be betterment for the citizens here in Baldwin Park. So lead, guide, and direct. In the name of the Lord Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Now, if you can please all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Deputy City Clerk, can I get a roll call, please?
Member Estela Mata Cárcamo,
Here.
Member Gregory Orozco,
Here.
Member Jorge Hernandez,
Here.
Member Nguyen Van Nguyen, absent. Member Sasha Rodriguez,
Here.
Vice Chair Pastor Elmer Jackson,
Here.
Chair Betsy Lara.
Here. Thank you. Now we will move on to public communications. Deputy City Clerk, is there anyone looking to speak?
I have not received any public comments.
Thank you. That said, is there anyone else that is looking to speak that did not fill out a speaker card? Now is your time. Okay, thank you. So now we will move on to new business. First on the agenda, we have the Measure BP Sales Tax Financial Update.
Good evening, the committee chair and members. I am very pleased to let you know as of today, we have, as of May 2024, we have received 6.9 million. And we also watch the cash flow very closely and make sure we invest the idle money. Some of them we invested in 3-month CD. Some of them we invested in 1 year or 2 year. Based on the projection we have or what project we are going to do when they need the money. And through April, we have received $101,000 from the Measure BP revenue, which is great news. Over $100,000 from investment income. And we have set aside about $2.572,000 for the projects. And therefore, the projected fund balance in Measure BP is $4.4 million. This concluded the financial update. I welcome any questions you may have.
Yes, I would like for you to do this publicly. What we have spent for the sports arena.
I believe we only spend small amount money and to do the study from the architecture by recreation, correct? Yes,
So 80,000 was approved for,
the architecture
yes.
study,
okay,
yes.
that's what I wanted to.
Yeah, all other projects that have been set aside with funding, we haven't spent it yet.
Question, maybe not for Rose. On the conceptual report, the money hasn't been spent yet. Is it in process? Are we still looking for an architect or when's an ETA on that report?
Member Orozco, yes, so you allocated $80,000. The process by which we will select a consultant architectural firm will be through an RFQ, which could be as few as 3 interested firms that we have made contact with already. I think we should have at least 3 interested firms. We will receive brief proposals. We're not making it too complicated so that it doesn't end up being a very long, dragged out process to select a consultant. So I would say that by the July, but no later than the August meeting, we should have somebody on board. And I know Manny's leading this effort, and so we talked recently. We should have the 3 firms that we can reach out to, and have them propose, and then we'll select, or we'll recommend to select the most qualified. It's just around the corner.
Is there a way that as they come in that we get to see them before the selection process? So we-
Absolutely, they will be working for you in a way. The council will award the contract because it's a contract award, not in the jurisdiction of the SOC per se, but once it gets approved, then they'll be working for the committee.
The reason I ask is because I think it'd be good for us to update, even though we have, like, let's say we get one in June, and we can just provide an update here during the SOC meeting saying we have received this, it's yet to be reviewed, we're waiting for 2 more proposals, because I think that was one of the highest requests that the community has been really vocal about, and I think the more we bring in the information as we receive it, I think the better it'll be.
Yes, so what we can definitely, to your point, member, is we received the proposals, we can immediately update you on the proposals we got and who the firms are. And that can be done even before we do any review. So yeah, very good.
And then I have a question with these other items. Are they pending in the process?
So as of what you see on the list, these are all of the requests that the SOC has granted, and all of them now have been concurred by the city council. There's one that is under study by the SOC. If you care to remember which one. So there was one in which more information is going to come back to the SOC either in June or in June.
Yeah, the ADA.
The bus stops,
Right,
but
so-
you know, that's sort of a bit in a tangle just because of the transportation study, the transit study that's underway. So we'll see for sure being able to bring back the information on all the stops and the conditions of them, that we definitely should be able to do. So that's pending. That's the only one that SOC has not acted on one way or the other. All the others have been acted on and council has concurred with the SOC. Those are all listed here.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair, if I may,
Go ahead.
I just have one question, Rose, regarding the sales tax that has been received. So this is not yet a full year, correct? Is this 11 months?
Yes, it's from May 2023 through April 2024.
Perfect, okay. I thought we started in April of last year, but we didn't, right?
We,
First revenue was May of 23?
yes,
Okay, so we still have one more month.
yes.
Do you have maybe an estimate as to how much will come in for the last month?
I believe we are going to receive about close to 7.5 at
Oh, that's
least,
good, okay,
at least.
perfect, okay. Thank you, Rose.
You're welcome.
Okay. Oh, excuse me. So now we'll move on to item 2, City and Community Empowerment Investment Opportunity Category, Requests for Funding Framework, and this is continued from our April 9th meeting.
Yes, Madam Chair. Whether you follow it on your screen or if you have a hard copy package, and we assembled a number of reference programs from cities in California as well as from our own, and for guiding us in discussing potential features of what the SOC has taken under consideration of creating a community micro grants program. And interestingly, the ones that are for your reference, they all have community-based benefits as the underlying premise. And the one that we attached from the city of Bolton Park is specific to the CDBG federal fund, and that has a lot more strings attached to it. So if it's okay with you, Madam Chair, we will go over it, each one and sort of their salient features, and then you can discuss each one as we come to it or at the end. And at the very top would be the Community Development Block Grant, which, as an example, it has all of 11 pages in the application. That's a little extensive. And it's tailored toward income-based support for folks who require services or who organizations that can provide services to income designated communities. And it's geared specifically for organizations, not for individuals. Not so much a template that we would necessarily follow. One, it is quite involved. There's quite a bit of information that is required. The organization must be a 501c3, and the services must always be tailored toward the community that are designated as low or moderate income. But nonetheless, it's an example of a grant program that we do run here in the city, and it's reviewed on an annual basis. As a matter of fact, it's coming up for review by the city council in tomorrow's council agenda for an annual review. The dollar amounts in that program can be as high as, well, there's no limit per se necessarily, but it's usually in the $15,000 to $25,000 range, but there's no upper limit necessarily. There's an annual allocation that the federal government gives us, HUD, usually around 125,000 to 130,000. So that's how, council decides whether we grant 5 or 10 or however many grants. So the amount, as I said, can vary between 15 and 25,000. Then you go to the next city. Oh, then I should say the next reference would be the city of Citrus Heights. And they call theirs a grant and incentive program. And it is geared toward neighborhood-based projects. Very basic premise. The application is only 2 pages. Pretty simple, fill out a form, 2 pages, name, purpose, and what have you. The city of Emeryville, also in California, theirs is called a community grant, and it's a arts-oriented grant, more for the arts and the visual arts, but not only for the art, but it's geared toward the arts. Theirs is 4 pages. Still simple enough. The city of Maywood, just south of us, theirs is called a community benefit fund. And theirs is based on organizations, or it's geared toward organizations. However, their range of sectors is quite broad, which, pretty much anything that pertains to the community, ranging from sports types of organizations, arts, education, so their range is between $5,000 and $10,000 award. That's how much they grant. Usually it's 5,000, but they can go up to 10,000 depending on the merits of the request. The city of Redwood City, theirs is called the Community Improvement Grant Program. It's intended to promote identity within a community and promote the building of community, which is inherent to what you are also considering, the building of community. And theirs could be pretty small grants, $300, 3 pages long, their application. But, theirs is pretty much very modest, very modest. It could be from a small community cleanup type of request. The city of Santa Clara, theirs is called the Community Grant Application, and it's intended to do more organizational activities, from trips or attendance to certain youth events. The program would fund those trips. So it could be school organizations, or they can be community organizations, not just school organizations. Their application is only 3 pages, also pretty simple. And then last would be the city of Temecula, not far from where we are. And their program is titled Community Service Funding Grant Program. Exclusive for nonprofits, so it's more organizational based. Their annual allocation is quite sizable, $100,000 a year for this program, with a per grant award of no more than $5,000 per organization. So $5,000 the individual award amount, and then $100,000 annual allocation. So, frankly, between all of these different models, they do touch on many of the points that the SOC was considering in the last discussion, can it be individuals? Can it be organizations? Can it be, multiple purposes, not just infrastructure improvements or physical improvements? It can also be programs. It could be activities. What also I was trying to ascertain whether there's a common thread among all of them, whether they operate on a front funding basis or a reimbursement basis or a no money exchange basis. That could be critical, right? Because in reading through the details, many of them require all sorts of justification and receipts and what have you. And then they say, well, in the event that any funds go unspent, you are required to return them. And I can only see how problematic that can become. But, for our purpose, it's important to consider whether we grant money as opposed to do on a reimbursement basis, or if it ends up being that the city acts as a revolving fiscal agent in all cases. So all of the expenditures go through the city upon submittal of proof and the like. And then the city pays for whatever the service or the billable needs to be. So no money ever gets exchanged. So that's obviously something to consider. It does end up being important because once we hand over the money, then all sorts of requirements kick in, and including. But then if agencies end up being challenged by not having front funding. So anyway, it's all for your discussion, and we can definitely, take it into further study in terms of the pros and the cons on the fiscal side. But what's obviously more important is on the purpose and the mission of what the program is supposed to do.
So, thank you for the copies because I actually took notes and printed it out. As I was looking through all of these, I really liked the Citrus Heights and the City of Emory applications because I felt that they were much more simpler. What I also did appreciate was the fact that it said applicants who failed to provide a final report or not utilizing the fund the way it was intended would be denied future funding. And then even having requirements for grant consideration. And then for organizations, I actually did like the one from the city of Maywood. Because I do think it's different to be, giving money to organizations versus actually community members. And I think for the community members, not that we want to make it as stringent or rigid, but I do think there has to be certain understandings of what the money can be used for versus not. So that's my initial feedback.
And I agree with you. I think as simple as it can be, I think the better it's going to be for everyone. The Citrus Heights was also my favorite because it's short, it's simple, and the Emeryville as well. And then as far as the nonprofits, I do agree with you. I think, we also need to look at, I think you had mentioned last time, like if the same applicant can continue to apply, so maybe including that on there as well.
On going on past records, in giving a grant, instead of giving them money, you give them receipts and they pay according to the receipts that you have given to them. And therefore that money is still in control. You say you're going to do this, then you do it. And here's the receipt, and here's the balance of the receipt. I think that's one of the things. I didn't get a chance to go through all of this, but also been, this has happened to me, and I was especially looking for religious. So it seems like religious and political is kind of left out. And even with Baldwin Park, it was left out with me. And that's why with my homes, I got a 501c3, which was called CH Recovery. It wasn't a church. It was a branch, but it wasn't a church. It was a recovery center, you know. And I guess I'm prejudiced about the churches. It seemed like when I was going through these, seeing the churches being left out. Even though I will say this, by me being on the committee, I'm left off automatically as far as the church is concerned. But there are a lot of things I've been a church that we do that could definitely use financial funds. And I'm not talking about, like I said, I'm eliminated with that. Like our Christmas, we spent $1,600 on just on Christmas toys and things to give out to the community. Which, hey, that we could have got a grant on that, and it could have saved the church. But I do need to go through this thoroughly to see exactly what is the best for us in giving out money. But I am approved of giving the money. You have it in the bank. You give me the receipt, and we pay the bill. That way, we know the money's going where they said it was going to go.
You're saying, Pastor Jackson, do hand over the money, but
No.
then as for receipts?
No.
No.
No, I'm saying who's ever getting the grant, hand over the receipt.
So reimbursement,
Yes, and we reimburse from the receipt.
got you.
And that way we know exactly where the money's going.
I see.
I'm curious, is that like difficult? Like, what would something like that look like in terms of a turnaround?
Our finance department is extremely fast. Within a week, no?
Yes, we have a policy and procedure to request all departments submit their invoices to us by every Monday. If they submit all the invoices on Monday, they will get paid on Thursday unless it's emergency situation.
Okay, that's a good turnaround. Because, sometimes there's a lot of red tape involved where it could take a long
I
time.
also want to point out that for that, those are city employees. I'm personally against the reimbursement as someone who does that in jobs. It can be a really financially straining situation for someone who needs that money like now to have to take out credit cards if it's more than what their limit is, and then they can't get reimbursed because they can't even afford to do the project without the money right off. I think that's just law limitations. People who don't have the financial means to spend 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, depending on what grant they get to get that. Because I know a lot of people in my community that wouldn't be like, oh, great, I got $5,000, but I have to put it first and get credit cards and reimburse later. That grant's not worth it for me. And I don't want that limitation in my opinion.
Well, maybe there can be a clause or something in writing that says if it exceeds a certain amount, then it'll be different, right? Because I'm even thinking if I'm on a street and it's a street that gets a lot of, because my street does, a lot of speed racers and there's been accidents on the street and we're asking for either a stop sign or a speed bump, I already know that's beyond what anybody can afford. I think maybe we can include language that depending on what that project is, because then if I look at planting trees, I could probably afford that, right? So maybe setting a limit as far as those projects that, someone would be able to take on and get reimbursed versus
Yes,
something
definitely.
bigger.
We can, one feature could be that we do advance a certain percentage, like a 10%, so that they have a revolving fund, so they don't have to be out of pocket. So it's trust, but it's not blind trust, so that's one way to be able to address the needs of organizations who may not have the pocket money or the credit card interest rates that quickly take over. So that's one. Others, models, as I was thinking through all of this, could be that like a speed bump. If it ends up being a grant that then gets turned over to the city to carry out the work, it's still credited to the community. It's still thanks to their initiative, but they will not be incurring any expenses because it'll be done by city workforce or a contractor led out by the city.
And you know what, Pastor Jackson, I think to your point, there maybe could be a way if we do some research that churches can still be included, but again, just having those guidelines.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't think they should be left out.
Oh, yeah, you need guidelines, believe me.
Interestingly, only one of the, if you guys picked up, want to say maybe Temecula had a clear exclusion to religious or political activities or programs, but you wanted to chime in on the church question.
Yeah, that's not really a city policy on religious expenditures. It's like Section 5, Article 16 of the California Constitution. So not the federal, but the state constitution that prohibits any spending of money for any religious reason. The city can't make any funds to a religious organization. That's why all of these applications have that. It's prohibited by state law.
So I think we will research it, but I'm thinking, Emo, that the trigger is whether the activity involved is for religious purposes as opposed to the organization being a religious organization. So for example, if a church group wants to go to Washington DC to make a civic visit, you know, the mall and the Capitol and the White House, civic based, that could still be eligible. Now, if they go to Washington DC for a religious convention, clearly that cannot be eligible. Am I?
That's a pretty good one. I think a really common example is if a church wants to build a community garden and they have to make that community garden available to
Everybody.
all people of all denominations. That's a common example of appropriate expenditure made to a religious organization. But there's a lot of examples in different cases, and we can send that over and provide, permissible expenditures to churches and how we can go about that in a legal way. There is legal ways to do that. So
Okay, because I was thinking more about what Pastor Jackson said, not so much to the church per se, but I know that a lot of churches have different social, initiatives they're involved in and supporting communities and individuals. So I think that's how I was thinking about it.
Food banks.
Right.
Clothing.
Right.
Etc.
Mm-hmm.
that's typically all okay
Right.
and permissible. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then I think because it relates to this, what I would like to ask is because we also have to decide what these grants will be, the dollar amount, and then how often they will be dispersed. But I think for me, I was just wondering, well, if someone, maybe the smaller projects, if someone wanted to plant trees or someone wanted to, I don't know, I can't think off the top of my head, but just if there was a way that you could give us estimates of what projects would typically cost, right?
Yes.
Just so that we have an idea of like how to come up with the range and what that would look like.
And in fact, I was really trying to get that info for you today, and we're working on it, just rough estimates, right? But
Yeah.
so I have trees. I do have those. I said, well, how about an estimate for 20 trees, thinking that 20 trees would be a good stretch of front parkway in a block or 2 blocks maybe. And how much that would cost. And we've done some great partnerships with community organizations that are nonprofits that raise money independently, and they help with volunteers to do a lot of the work. So, but assuming that all the work will be done by the city, for 20 trees, it's about $8,000. The cost of the tree, the planting of the tree, just the labor, the watering of the tree, the stakes, the watering bags, you know, you've
I
seen,
didn't know it took that much.
so about $8,000.
Okay.
Ricky, would that also include like something like planting trees, an inspection of whether it's safe to put a tree there and if the roots grow and stuff like that, if that's good for the buildings around it? Just like for that example, are those costs also gonna estimate like safety concerns or like how's that gonna work when approving these budgets? Because I don't want to be able to give this person be like, oh yeah, we're approving your money, great job, and then turns out, oh, it's actually not feasible for the city to do this. Get what I mean?
We would go through the whole procedure. Uh, You're right, in terms of spots that are suitable for trees. And they know, like trees are like pets and family members, right? You take it on forever. It's for life. And so, yeah, the suitability of the spot is very important. We've learned a lot more on the types of trees that go in certain areas depending on the width of the parkway. And so, yes, in fact, we'll be having a tree planting event on June 21st. So be prepared. So that's one cost estimate. I did get for you. I know questions on the light poles in areas that are dark. So we are growing more and more comfortable with using solar powered light poles that do not require wiring. And the only drawback is whether they can always be powered. And, you know, it looks like the kinds of batteries that come with them can ensure that they will always be powered at night. So that's very, very encouraging because, you know, usually the worry is if you have a spot that is dark and, you know, running electricity from point A to point B is what ends up costing the most. We may not have to worry about that as much, especially if we're trying to alleviate areas that are just super dark and this provides lighting in a near optimal way. So that's very encouraging.
I want to ask a question about, we're dealing with the city. We're dealing with diversities of groups and in getting a grant, and we will be treating the city and the group the same with the applications that they need for of the loan or the grant that they need. And give you an example. I don't know, you remember Baldwin Park Beautiful? Or do we still have that? Where they would go and paint, get rid of the
Graffiti.
graffitis and what have you. If they have an organization like that that want to come and get a grant to take people out to get rid of the graffitis, do they have something like that even now?
So they have the graffiti program. I know they have the graffiti program. And I think Public Works just had an event, right, Enrique? A
Yes.
few weeks ago where they had volunteers to go out there and the beautification of cleaning up and stuff. And I apologize, I wasn't here at the last meeting. So I'm trying to catch up on what the framework and all of this that you guys have been working on this. But I do have a question in reference to, I understand how you would give the grants to, let's just say, nonprofit organizations or different organization groups for different things such as the field trips and all that. But when it comes to neighborhoods and residents, let's just say, for example, I'm a resident and I'm applying for this grant because I feel that my neighborhood needs more lights, more trees, and some sidewalk repairs. How are you going to go about setting the guidelines and the framework to give this money to an individual resident? Because now you're giving it to a resident. So wouldn't it be wise to disqualify individual residents and just, as Pastor Jackson just mentioned, maybe those beautification projects where different organizations come in and say, we want to come in and plant X amount of trees, or we'll come out and help you paint whatever needs to be painted. and give that specific organization the money or the funding to be able to go out and do the work. And they come in and get the volunteers. Only because I see it to be very difficult if we go with individuals or residents to say, well, my neighborhood needs sidewalks. We're going to get 100 people saying, my neighborhood needs different sidewalks or new trees. How would you guys go about setting the framework for that or the guidelines for that, specifically for individuals that are not nonprofits or organizations?
So
I don't, we haven't gotten far, so you didn't miss a lot. We've just started the conversation. And that's why Enrique brought forth these different templates, because we didn't even have a conceptual idea of where to start or how to navigate this.
And even not being an individual, what if the community had grouped themselves together? And the money were not going to an individual, but going to the project itself.
Wouldn't it be better if they're able to apply and the city just takes control of figuring out how we're going to get that neighborhood with the new trees that they requested and the new sidewalk repairs, and let the city handle it?
Yeah.
This way, there's no exchange of money,
That's good.
and we're not giving any reimbursements or upfront money to any individual or residential groups, because I don't see that. I just don't see that going well. I think it would be best that maybe specific residents or groups, such as neighbors, can get together and fill out a request versus an application for a grant. More like fill out a request form and say, well, we're going to grant each individual neighborhood whatever that applies for an X amount of money. And these are the categories that you're able to do with that. So as an example, let's just say me and Betsy and Estela live in the same neighborhood. And we come to an agreement that we need new trees, we need, sidewalk repairs, and we need new lighting. We don't know what that's going to cost, but we know we need it. So we come to you, we make that request. You guys figure out what the cost is going to be, and you figure out how you're going to go get it taken care of. Versus you saying, okay, we're going to give you the money, you go figure out where you're going to get your trees, your lights. I think that's just going to create a big nightmare. I think it would be best for that category to maybe go about them doing a request form and then the city taking care of it. This way there's no exchange of money from any of that. I mean, that's just because I just don't see this going well if it goes into individual groups of residents.
And if you don't mind me just adding to that, so I've been trying to hit my microphone because I do think it is going to be more complex. One, for the individual or individuals that are going to be requesting the funding, them not being able to come up with a funding or it's just going to be a lot of transactional confusion, I think, for everyone. And I also think that it is your suggestion is great, because the city may already have programs in place to plant those trees like we're doing already, and to put those bumps on the streets for safety. So I think our fund, or this fund that we are overseeing, shouldn't just encompass everything and all the needs of the community. I think this was just an addition to. So I do agree with you, Councilmember Damian, for the submissions or requests to go through to the city. The city then reviews it and funnels it accordingly. Whether if it can be funded by the city, then just go through the proper channels. If it's something that the city cannot complete in the funding, then it'd be proposed by the city in to the SOC committee.
Yeah, so taking the best of both you guys, if I may. We had talked about having the resident, if it's going to be an individual or a non-organized group, meaning they're not an organization, but they're just neighbors, that they submit their desire, let's just call it a simple application. They need not worry whether it's a grant or it's a request, but it is through the SOC. It's a solicitation of the SOC, right? Because we already have the normal channels by which the city receives requests. this is specific to the SOC, that they say, we want this area beautified, and let's just say it includes the trees and the streetlights that Councilmember Damian mentioned, and yes, some curb work and some sidewalk improvements, some signage improvements, sort of like a complete makeover of the public right of way, which, like you said, Member Mata, it does now become something more complicated. But that's what they say on the application. Since we're gonna make it a very simple application, we're not gonna require like a sketch or a drawing or anything like that. It comes to us, your staff. We do some vetting, we go and meet with the neighbors and we determine, oh, wow, this requires all of this. We then present it to the SOC and said, look, this is something that is best done by the city on behalf of the requestor. So it's still their request, but we take it under the city sort of management. No money ever gets exchanged. You will approve a budget because we were going to present a budget for it. And components like the tree planting component, as an example, we would leverage other resources, such as we've been doing with tree planting. We were in Walnut Creek about 3 months ago. We partnered with a nonprofit organization that brought grant funding to the fore. We used the grant money and a bunch of volunteers to do the actual labor, but Public Works was there directing the work and approving the work, because obviously, like you guys pointed out, it needs to be the right kind of tree and the right location. So all those elements are brought to bear, and it ends up being a wonderful outcome. But yes, I agree that will not require any exchange of money, no reimbursement, no front funding, none of that. But it is granted to the requestor, and it was their initiative that will make it, and your funding that will make it possible.
So we will give the funds that the city have requested for the community.
They requested it, but we gave it a cost estimate,
Okay.
and then you would look at it and approve it if you. So the burden of completeness or accuracy should not be such that folks will say, well, we don't want to spend, all this time trying to put together an application. It can be sketchy, but then we follow up, meet with them in the neighborhood and give it clear definition, then give it an estimate. Because they may not know, well, how much does a speed bump or speed hump cost? And what's the process by which we would have to go through? So we will work with them.
I have a question. What's the difference between this is going to be between someone coming up to one of our meetings and being, hey, can we get a cost estimate for this? I really feel like my neighborhood needs new stoplights, but I missed the application deadline, or if we don't have this, and they just come up and they just say it, compared to filling it out online.
Well, like right now, say, by and large, is usually the whether there's sufficient funding or not. It's always the case that, there isn't enough funding.
But like
Whereas-
right now, if someone came up, like we have people who come here for like the senior center every day, going like every meeting, going, hey, we need funding for that. Would that be something that they can just say right here and we can help them with that, or would they need to go through this application?
Well, oh, sorry.
If you don't mind me asking, I thought that this is why we're doing the application process. So just in case anyone, whether they come in person or send an email requesting a specific request, they need to complete the application or go through the process.
Yes.
So in essence, I would think that if somebody comes and requests, then we would, route them to the application process.
Also just like to make it that if we have a verbal request, it's still just as valid as if someone does it, because we're also keeping in mind people in here who might not speak English, or if we have a Spanish version, whether they're literate enough to write an application like this and feel comfortable to either send in an email, have their kid come and translate. I want to make it as accessible as any way to get this funding. If we allocate, let's say we allocate 20,000 for this cycle, I want to make sure that it's not just the written one, but if that's allowed, that we have verbal confirmation that it's basically the same thing, same process for someone who maybe felt more comfortable speaking it or sharing it out loud rather than that. Because I know, let's say my own grandmother, she would not be able to fill out this application if she wanted to without having our help. And it's like, a lot of people don't want to burden, be like, hey, can you fill this out for me? Rather just speak their mind right here, and we take it just as seriously. We put them in the same application, and it's just as equitable as possible.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't think it's that we wouldn't take it seriously, but I think just working in an office, you have to memorialize things or they just get lost. So I would hope that they would have someone that would help them, or even if they came up here, that we could leverage one of our city staff members to say, hey, because that's what I would do. If someone walked in and said something, I'd be like, you know what, I can't do it right now, but let me call you. I will fill it out for you as we're on the phone, or come see me tomorrow. Just sit with me. I'll ask you the questions and then I'll fill it out for you. Just because, like I said, I would hate that someone came to request something and we say, yes, we're going to take this verbal seriously, which I think we should, but I think it needs to be memorialized somewhere.
And that's what I think our notes are for, isn't it? Because like I said, they might not have time to come tomorrow. They might not have time to do anything. This is the only time they have. I'll make sure everyone has the same opportunity, whether it's written or verbal, that it's notes. But I'm not sure if that's allowed to be like.
There's something that really impressed me in one of the cities. Let me just get my notes here. The city of Redwood City, they were very specific about this program being one in which it promotes the building of community and the instilling pride in a community. And so that in a way encourages folks to work with more than just, it encourages to work with neighbors. A lot of times one particular neighbor may want certain thing in the community, but the rest of the community does not. And so, at least that there be some level of collective consensus on a particular request. And so I think, going through some level of formality in the application, I'll be very simple, but still some formality, I think encourages that.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, in my schooling, if it wasn't written, it never happened.
Yeah, and if I may make a suggestion, Enrique, maybe I see Sasha's point of view, or board member Sasha's point of view. But again, we do need it in writing, because this will be a first come, first served basis, right? Depending on how much, how fast the funding runs out. But obviously you would want to have the application as simple as possible. You don't want to have all this red tape. Second, obviously you want it in multi-languages. So you want it Spanish, English, Mandarin, the most spoken languages in our city. But then maybe have a liaison that is, as for example, let's just say there is an elderly woman who only speaks Spanish, right? I would, say maybe my grandma, like she stated. Obviously, it's gonna be more difficult if she doesn't have someone to help her, which again, I would hope that one of her grandkids or children would help her fill it out. But just in case they don't, maybe we can have someone from the city, help them fill it out. I don't think there's gonna be many of those, but just in case there is, maybe have someone appointed as a liaison from the city to help them fill out the paperwork on that application. I mean, if there's no conflict, I'll even volunteer my time to help them fill it out. That's not a problem. But I think that it's absolutely important that the application is filled out as if they were applying for a grant, except for this would be a request that they're applying for, so that the city can take over on that. But I agree. I think it's very important that it has to be filled out in paper.
Excuse me, I don't mean to. I want some clarity on this. We're not dealing with individuals. We're dealing with group, am I right? Are we dealing with individuals?
I think to Enrique's point, I think it can be an individual that takes the lead, but I think in the spirit of community and engaging everyone, that it would be a collective
They're right.
initiative with just one person maybe taking the lead as far as like, oh, I'll fill out the application on behalf of, our street community or whatnot. So that's what you meant, right? Like someone can lead it, but there's engagement from a group.
Especially when the project is going to include more than just one simple thing. If it's just one tree in front of someone's house, that's individual. It's going to be this entire block or 2 blocks, and we want the sidewalks replaced or repaired, and repaint the red curb in whichever corner and what have you, replace the stop signs because they're faded, any number of things. Then community support is important. So to the extent that an individual neighbor can do that legwork, we would encourage that, right? Because the city can do it, but then it's better if the neighbors themselves come together. But so to answer your question, it's individual in some cases, but it can also be a neighborhood group in others. And then you're growing formality, and certain things would be a 501c3 organization. So it depends on how in the end you guys feel we can have different categories. I was thinking whether you would be interested in us sort of piloting something more quickly. And what occurred to me would be organizations that we know clearly serve a public community benefit, but they already have ready organization. And, the fact that we're in the middle of Little League and baseball and softball, and those organizations having need for equipment and, for a number of things, but they're organized as 501c3s. If we could pilot something with, say, sports organizations, but that would be in the organization category, meaning they're 501c3s. And it could sort of get the wheels turning of how this could eventually be all inclusive in different categories, individual, neighborhood groups, organizations of all types, and so on. Not yet graduating into businesses. We had talked about whether business organizations could also apply, but I'm saying for now, let's just stay with community-based organizations. But, we could develop something specific for sports organizations as a pilot for you guys to consider.
I agree there with, on that end, the 501c, you have an entity, you have a tax number, et cetera, for roads, et cetera. But I was thinking we do have categories now. Individuals is probably the last one on the list, and 501c's first. But I was thinking about some organizations that are out there that are not 501c's, that are like Ballin Park High School Baseball requesting 500 pounds of brick dust. They're not a 501c, but they're an entity in our community. My block, 3 or 4 neighbors get together. That's a little different from Ballin Park High School. I see them at a different category. Or if an individual wants a tree in front of their house, that's a different category in itself. In that breath, a pilot program that people and the community are aware of, that we do exist up here. Having say a project comes to us and the city goes out and says, we can't do it. We're gonna hire an outside contractor. Maybe we look at one as a pilot program or something to that effect, that funding has a mark of, powered by Measure BP. You know, so the community knows the dollars are going out from there. We're paying an entity. Rose has track of the dollars going out. And everybody knows we put 500 pounds of brick dust at Baldwin Park High School. So I think as we build the framework, instead of building the whole mountain, you know, build piece by piece, and 501Cs would be probably the easiest entities, because there's several in our community that needs help, and we could figure out budgets, dollar amounts, how many times they could do it per year, or is it seasonal, et cetera. So that's my 2 cents there.
Have you guys set a limit as to how much will be spent annually for this?
No,
For all categories, nothing like that? And you guys haven't decided what categories to go on?
Not yet.
None of
So,
that, okay.
but it's starting to
Yeah.
take form, as you could see, but yeah. We knew it was gonna take several meetings, right, board members?
Only because I know, I heard a couple of times mentioned, like Baldwin Park High School and stuff like that. So, although I fully support, all the schools in the high school sports, but we also have to be mind conscious that some of these fundings should come from the district itself. And so we
absolutely.
have to be careful, where we're allocating the funding and we're going to the community. So you guys really need to set kind of the guidelines as to, number one, how much will be spent annually? What's the max cap? Will you be funding these every month, every quarter, every 6 months? How would you be funding these grants or these opportunities? And then also the guidelines. What are you guys going to allow? Individuals, to be honest with you, I think it's going to be very difficult. I think in that aspect of it, I think we as a city should take a bigger role, and maybe us actually drive out into the neighborhoods and see what needs to be addressed. And instead of having the residents address it, maybe we address it, right? And figure out these neighborhoods need a lot of work, cosmetic or whatever it may be. Why don't we put a plan in place to figure out how we're going to beautify that area, and kind of, take that from the hands of them, and then focus on different categories that are in much need, because there's a lot of different nonprofits. We've got schools, we've got sports, we've got, churches, we've got a lot of need in the community, and there's a lot of great organizations that do help. But yeah, you guys have your work cut out for you, because you guys are going to have to come together to agree on categories, annual caps. But I think maybe going with the annual cap is going to be your first step, so that okay, if you're going to allocate $100,000 a year, are you guys going to set caps on individual grants? Or if you guys are going to go with a request, are you guys going to set caps on the requests? Because when it comes down to like the street lighting, sidewalk repairs, all of that, that can get very costly. And so, $10, $15, $20,000 may not even be enough for one grant, depending on the work that needs to be conducted in that neighborhood, or if there's a couple of blocks involved. That's why I would think, Enrique, that maybe for that category, I think it would be wise for us as a city to take a bigger role and see what needs to be addressed. And then maybe say, okay, we're going to get these categories from the city, and we'll take care of this neighborhood beautification, whatever it may be. And the SOC committee kind of focus more on, do we have National Little League, East Side Little League, American Little League, road runners, cheerleaders, whatever sports are out there that need, maybe have them apply for the grants. But these are just ideas for you guys to kind of put on there, but there's still a long ways to go from what I can see. And it's going to take a lot of deliberation for you guys. So, yeah.
I was thinking of sort of fast tracking, at least as a pilot, because, the sports sector is well organized, right? And the needs are probably more easily identifiable. And it's been a long time since I've been in the snack bar of a little league snack bar, but, if they need a fryer for the French fries, whatever. We know little leagues travel. The softball teams travel. There's a time in which they have to go out of state or whatever. They usually do a whole bunch of fundraising. Sometimes they can't even go because they don't have enough funds. So that is something that we can probably get out the gate sooner, as a way of the SOC looking at something more substantive as an example, but understanding that it's intended only as a pilot, but it can have a quicker release for interest. if we limit it to only sports youth organizations? No adults, Greg. Okay. As a pilot.
We actually just started adult wrestling in May, so.
I do have one quick question or more for clarification. So when the grants do come about, obviously they have to come to the SOC. So the SOCs approve them, right?
Yes,
Once the SOC committee approves these grants, is it final or does it still have to go to the city council for approval?
it goes to the city council.
Okay, so they would recommend it to the city council and the city
Yes.
council would ultimately make the decision as to whether that grant's approved or not?
Correct, because
Okay.
it's the actual appropriation of the money.
Got it, okay.
But to your point, Councilmember Damian, what I think we would like to see happen though, Enrique, is that even before they make it to us, that there's some system in place where the city is looking at other sources of income and support, whether it's partial or full or whatever that may be before it comes to the SOC. So that we just don't become the end all, especially if there are other supports. And then the other thing I was thinking was, wow, we might even get inundated with the same projects, but just different neighborhoods or very similar, right? So I do like what you said about going out there and assessing the need, because I think it is important to Councilmember Damian's point, like, is that something appropriate that should even come to us? That maybe should be dealt by the city? But I guess if we start getting proposals that are similar, if, city personnel will be going out there, I mean, and it's a question, do we then funnel them in, need? Right? Because I may get mine in first or my group, but maybe her neighborhood has a bigger need than mine does. I'm even cautious of saying first come, first serve, because if you're assessing the need, I may have submitted first, but I may not have as big a need as another neighborhood.
Right. So, for example, the city of Maywood, they allocate 100,000 a year. Now, they don't have large infrastructure projects in mind, grant you. It's not like, it's more other types of community projects. But to the extent that you do or you're thinking to do, 100,000 obviously wouldn't be enough. So when we create the categories, a cap more appropriate for non-infrastructure kinds of projects can be, well, let's come back to the pilot on the sports, for example. You say, we will set a cap of 10,000 for this pilot. And we make it available to all the sports related organizations, Little League, cheer, softball, but non-school for now, non-school. This is outside of school. But it's 10,000. And then you can go further and say, we will grant no more than 1,000 per organization. Or you could say 15,000 cap and grant no more than 1,200 per organization. We can sort of do it from the top down as opposed to from the bottom up. Because if we do from the bottom up, people may not know how much to request. If we set enough numerical guidelines to say, let's just say 1,500 maximum, then they'll know, well, if we're going to request for a trip that's going to cost us 10 grand, to your point, Madam Chair, well, they know they still got to do their fundraising and everything else, but this will help them.
So when you're talking about this pilot, like would you need a decision on something from us today or what?
No.
What would
Well, if you
like?
direct us to develop a
What it
more
would look-
specific proposal just for that category, yes, then you would have to direct us today.
What do my colleagues think?
Well, before I decide, I have a question. Currently, if, let's say, a sports or a little league wanted wanted to request funding from the city without even knowing about the SOC, what was the process in the past? Do you have something in place to allocate funding for, you don't?
No, it's been hit and miss. So we've helped, I think, two organizations.
But
And
is there funding allocated for the
general fund.
No, general fund?
No, there's no specific budget for it.
But if the application would come through, the request would come through to the city, there, it would go to the general fund and then city council would approve if there's funding.
Well, I bet you they wouldn't approve any right
They
now.
wouldn't approve, okay.
So, I don't,
Well, I was just asking out of curiosity, because if there's something already in place, we can look at, using that for this. And it might be a little bit easier because if it's already in place, we could say, we can do a pilot project based on a request that has been done in the past.
So I'll give you an example. Recently, remember Mata, the Eastside Little League that had gone dormant for 2 years during the pandemic, 3 years, I think. So literally, they went back to ground zero, had no infrastructure, no volunteers, no board. Literally, they started from the ground up. The council clearly saw that they needed help. Eastside came and pled the council for help. And the council made a tough decision because obviously, so the council granted them help. I want to say $12,000. Very unique because they had absolutely, I mean, they were holding fundraisers. I think, Greg, you know about all this. Fundraisers twice a week. I mean, they worked their butts off. They were able to open their season and they're operating, which the city council wanted.
yeah, so in a sense, there's no funding for public assistance in that way, right? I don't think, there's no budgets that are set aside for that. So there's never something where they can come and say, we want to apply for this. It's just, we've never had it and we don't have that funding available. Obviously there's times where, you kind of move the money around and say, okay, well, we can not spend it here and, use it over here. But well, I don't even know. We'll see the budget presentation next month, how we're looking. But at this point, for those types of grants, this is the particular fund that you would want to use for that, because at the end of the day, Measure BP was set for the community, right? So this is where you want to lay your your guidelines and what it is that you guys want to allocate to what type of, who do you want to open the doors to? In other words, who do you think is able to apply for this? And then obviously, what is going to be the cap for each individual grant? And what are you guys going to spend annually? What's going to be the cap for you guys to spend annually from this Measure BP? Because this is going to be an ongoing annual thing, correct? So you want to make sure that you guys set a cap for it annually. But yeah.
And I'm thinking sports because we know the need is great there. And it starts building up the infrastructure for the sports complex.
Madam
Yeah.
Chair, I would like to know the type of grants that the Baldwin Park, what did it call it? The CDBG gives out. What types of grant do they give out? Do anybody know here?
Yes, I can tell you certainly. For example, the Church of the Redeemer runs the food bank. So they have applied for a grant for a food bank. So but it has all these categories and criteria. It has to be that the recipient must be of a certain income level. There's all sorts of verifications that need to be done. I brought it as an example, not as an example as much as just for reference, because it's quite complex and very paperwork, bureaucratic burden, a lot of documentation. But let me give you the other entities that receive those grants, okay? Because I did bring it with me. So the Church of the Redeemer Food Bank. There's an organization called the Domestic Violence Advocate. The ESGV Coalition for the Homeless. Family Service Center. It also funds graffiti removal. So to your to your point, Madam Chair, that, if say someone requests graffiti removal funding here, we will make sure that, all these other sources are already paying for it. There's a program in PD called the Pride Program, a youth employment program. So those are the sort of community grants. And it's $125,000 a year of federal money, not city money, but, well, in the custody of the city, but it's federal funds.
Now, will we be adding on to those grants if they require SOC grant?
Oh, that's separate, isn't it?
Yeah, this is CDBG federal grants, but
No, if the individuals, the different companies that are getting that grant may come here
Oh,
and also want a grant for what they're doing, plus receiving the grant from the Baldwin Park.
so the example of the Church of the Redeemer, for example, they would go to CDBG for the food bank, but they could come to the SOC for, let's just say they want to offer a literacy program to the entire community.
Okay.
They could come to you for that.
I have a question for you or Danny. As a cap, $100,000 is usually a number you put as a cap, or can we use a percentage? Because if we put $100,000, we have $9 million coming in. It's less than 1% of a grant, right? How do you see that? Should it be a number, or should it be a percentage, or should that be a floating yearly number that gets changed as money's in the bank?
My recommendation would be a dollar amount. And obviously keep in mind that as an example, let's just say these are just estimates and examples. Let's just say we're generating $8 million a year, right? We're on track to generate hopefully 7.5 in the first year. So it's fair to say that we can start generating $8 million depending on how many more businesses come into the city. If we're really allocating, let's just say that the sports complex becomes a reality, right? And we're gonna obtain a bond to build that, because we're not gonna wait, until we have the money to build it. So we're gonna need to get a bond for that. If we get a bond, let's just say $50 million. With the interest rates the way they are right now, and I don't know what the bond rates are, Rose will probably know more than that, but is it fair to say, Rose, that maybe estimating about $3 to $4 million a year to pay that bond
Yes,
on a
Ba-
50 million?
yes. Based on the current one of the similar bond amount, 54 million, it costs the city about 3 million per year. However, when the city issued that bond in 2019, we took the advantage of low interest rate. With the interest rate going on now, about little bit over 7%. So the annual payment, I assume, will go up to about 4 million per year. And I also already got the estimated projection for 25. We are going to receive little bit under 6 million based on the economic forecast for next fiscal year based on statewide and nationwide. And the reason we are going to receive more this time is more than a fiscal year. The taxes we start getting is cumulative from January 2023. That's why it's little bit higher. But if you go by fiscal year from July 1st to June 30 for next coming fiscal year, we projected little bit under $6 million. I think it might be better to go by the dollar amount instead of percentage. And also based on the plan that the community really want to have the sports park. So based on the projected cost, then you might be better off set aside the limitation of dollar amount to help the community in different sports group.
Yeah, and thank you for that clarification, Rose, because as she mentioned, now my hopes of $8 million, you just shot them down. But so because of the projection for next year, we're not even going to be at $7 million. So if we're already, allocating 4 to 5 million, depending on the interest rate, let's just go with $4 million. And we're generating, let's just say, I don't know, 6.5. That's only going to leave us 2.5 to play with for the whole year on whatever else is there. So my recommendation would be to start slow and then move our way up as the money comes in and how we're seeing how it's going. So I would recommend the first year, let's start off, as a pilot program. Let's do a cap of $100,000. Seeing how that goes, if we look at, okay, you know what, $100,000 really didn't go that far. Do we have the ability to double it? Then it's something that you guys can take a look at and recommend it to the city council and say, we don't feel that $100,000 is enough. I think there's enough there to double this to $200,000. Let's move it up to 200. But at least you can play with that every year. For the first year, since it's something that we've never done before and that you guys have never done before, I would recommend start off with the $100,000 cap and then put caps on the grants for individual organizations and see how it goes from there. And if anything, we just move it up instead of, I would rather you guys move it up than to say, you know what, we're going to have to cut it down.
So then with that 100,000, then we would have to decide, I mean, is that something that? Oh, I think you answered it. We would just set a cap. It would be $100,000 total, but then per issuance, what does that look like? Right?
Exactly. So I would recommend start with the cap, 100,000 as an example. Then from there, you're going to go with the categories. Within those categories, and you're going to see, okay, we can maybe cap it at 10 or 15 or 20, depending, right? But if you're capping it at 20, that's only 5. So you have to see what categories and what is it that you really want this money to be intended for. Because again, if we go with the neighborhood beautification or repairs or upgrades or whatever, $100,000 is not going to go anywhere. So that's going to be something more that we need to take on the city's role to see how we're going to address that and see what type of unrestricted funds are available. And let's just say we've come up with the plan and we say, you know what, we drove the city, we saw these neighborhoods, it's going to cost us, $2 million to upgrade this area. Okay, how much can we allocate from unrestricted funds to cover this? And if they say, well, we have 1.5, okay, you're short 500,000. Come to the SOC, get the approval for those $500,000, complete it for them. There's your $2 million, your project is done. But at least you got the money from the unrestricted funds that's already available there. And then you guys allocate whatever is needed, just the way RCS did it with the upgrades at Morgan Park, right? They came to you and they said, this is what we have, this is what we need, this is what we're missing. Short and to the point. And you guys said, okay, well, you guys did the work, you guys obtained as much funding as possible, but you're short this much. You brought it to the SOC versus coming to you and saying, we want this and we want you to fund all of it, right? Well, in my opinion, I would be like, okay, well, what have you done to try to figure out what other funding sources are available if they are? Because some sources or some categories, there are some type of funding available, and in some instances, there's not. So you would have to say, okay, well, what are you going to bring to the table? And then we'll kind of, just complete that for you. So that's the way you would want to look at it for the upgrades on the trees, the lights, sidewalks, because there's a lot of sidewalks that need to be repaired. Roads, well, they're not private streets, but they're alleyways that I've been pushing for, when are we going to get this done? Because it looks horrible. People are getting their tires flat. So I think for that, and that this is just my opinion, you guys are the ones making the decision on this, but for that aspect of it, I just don't think that it should be up to the SOC to figure it out. I think it should be up to us, the city, to figure out what needs to be taken care of and how we're gonna take care of it. And you guys worry more about the grants that are gonna go to assist the community. And that's how we go by
The
it.
only thing though, Councilmember Damien, is that, we want to promote community buy-in to things that are part and parcel of what makes up the city. And to the extent that the SOC should expect there to be the exhaustion and leveraging of every possible funding source, that if in the end, it still requires some assistance from the SOC, that, yeah, you consider it. But it also provides for a connection for folks passing Measure BP, for community improvements, for infrastructure improvements, and yes, obviously the sports complex. So you have set your priorities, right? But the filtering of what funds should be brought to the fore has to be part of the process. It cannot just be where a request comes in or a request for funding comes in from a community organization or a neighborhood group, and we as staff just do a straight pass through and say, here, SOC, grant $3 million for the repaving of what street you live in. To Councilmember Damon's point, we have to exhaust all the other possible funding sources and go through that filtering. We will do that and then bring it to you. I think the bus stops, the representation of how we brought that to you as if it was only that, and not showing what other efforts had been done. I know that was probably not the best example for you to deal with, and how we leverage or not leverage, as opposed to how, RCS did their. So we learn on how we present the information. But yeah, it'll be incumbent upon us to ensure that every other possible funding source is considered before bringing it to the SOC. But I do believe it's important for folks to make a connection of how an improvement can come about by them initiating it. I mean, obviously, that does not relieve us from the obligation that we have every single day to ensure that we address stuff that's already an imminent need. But the reason why a lot of times it's not done is because we don't have the funding. But, we shouldn't assume that it's one or the other, but, have it all be visible to you is what I'm saying.
So I think we could probably continue this conversation for the next 3 hours, which I don't think we want to do.
But
So-
if we can do the pilot,
Well, no, that's what I was gonna ask my colleagues up here, is if we're comfortable with staff putting together a proposal of what that project would look like, bringing it to our next meeting, and then we can refine it based on the recommendations that are made. But then separate from that, I do think we need to start individually, start thinking about, if we take on that $100,000, what is that gonna look like under different categories? How often will they be issued? Is it ongoing? Is it quarterly? Is it every 6 months? And then what are those guidelines, whether it's an individual versus a community or neighborhood versus a nonprofit? And then I think with that, just thinking about what are our non-negotiables. And if we can bring that as well back to the next meeting, because again, I think it might take a couple more meetings before we finalize it, but I think we've made a lot of progress tonight as far as, just starting to morph into something. So I don't know if everyone's comfortable with that.
I love the idea of having a pilot program. I just think we as a group should decide what the pilot program is, not necessarily sports, because as Enrique mentioned, the community knows we're doing something with sports, as in the sports complex, and up for us to all decide if that's the first community one that we want to tackle. I totally agree that it's super important, especially to give the funding to youth sports, but I would love if we all collectively agreed, especially taking notes from the community engagement meetings that we had, what we would like the pilot to be, which category it is. And I think that's something we should decide at the next meeting. And to also get a refreshment of the engagement the community engagement meetings that we had, those notes, I'm not sure what I did with mine, but if we can, if the city has any to resend them to us, just so we can get a refresher as well, just so you remind us what the community wanted us to do.
And not only that, I really would like to see more of the community here listening or even getting involved. We're working for them. And the taxes was raised for our community, and I'd like to hear from them. We can have more town meetings or something to get the community involved. Because we, again, like I stated before, we start spending money. That's when they're gonna come out, but you need to come out before
Yeah.
the money being spent, and your voice need to be made heard.
Well, part of, if you were, I'm already envisioning sports organizations coming here, because part of the requirement be that they make a brief pitch to the committee in person, in addition to the application, right? So you will see them. And I do feel that if we move ahead with something now that's palpable, meaning a pilot, and what I'm thinking that it be for organized 501(c)(3)s, sports organizations, is at least for this pilot. And we'll come up with draft guidelines and see what you guys think. But that probably is something that is worth getting out and see how the uptake ends up being. I think you're gonna get a lot of interest. And yes, I agree. It's going to be where other school organizations are going to say, well, what about us? But let's not include schools in this round yet, just non-school community organizations that are involved in sports.
I think, Enriquez, if we left that sports entity off the back of the 501(c), we just open it up 501(c)s because not everybody's into the sports. They don't have 8-year-old kids at Little League today, but there's other 501(c)s like the homeless organization.
It's only for the pilot.
Yeah.
Member Orozco, just as a way of getting the wheels turning, because
Okay.
we can talk a lot about, but I think this will give us some palpability of how this can be structured once you do decide on the complete program.
Okay.
So I have a question. So the pilot program that you're going to present to us for next meeting, that's not going to be already set in stone for us to approve. It would be like, this is what it would look like. And then we just decide on the categories to kind of address what you're asking. And then we decide the cap, we decide the number of grants that are going to be given. And so we'll finalize all of that. This is not going to be like the final.
Well, I think it's
It's only for the
Yeah,
pilot.
it's separate. So that's why I said one would be the proposal for this pilot and what it would look like. And then we would give feedback and refine it based on what we feel it should have or not have or be revised. But then separate from that, I ask that we all really think about if we're going to be conservative and start with $100,000 separate from the pilot, that we think about what does that cap look like under different categories? How often would those be issued? Is it ongoing until the money's exhausted? Is it quarterly? Is it every, bi-yearly? And then guidelines, whether it's an individual applying, a community or neighborhood versus a nonprofit. And then just really thinking about what are the non-negotiables that need to be included under those different categories. So that's separate. I think what Enrique's trying to say is this would give us the experience of what it would look like from beginning to end. But then I think it might also help in the sense of if we can get the word out there, that then we'll have other nonprofits, we might have community members. So I think it might even spark interest as to like, well, how do we, apply for different things?
Well,
Yeah, so, but the proposal, it's just gonna be a proposal is what I'm saying. It's not gonna
Yeah.
be like, this is the pilot
No.
project. Okay.
No, I would expect that we're.
You
giving-
decide.
we're still giving feedback.
just a power.
We recommend or we propose and you guys decide.
No, it's nothing set in stone.
No,
It's
I
just-
agree. I think we need a proposal to start, pilot project, and then we need to finalize, the caps and all the other details.
So is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
I agree.
You have your homework.
Okay.
Okay, so next item is number 3, the Stakeholders Oversight Committee, April 9th, 2024 meeting minutes for approval. Can I get a motion?
I make a motion that
Pastor Jackson.
the minutes be approved.
Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
Member Estela Mata,
Yes.
Member Gregory Orozco,
Yes.
Member Jorge Hernandez, Member Sasha Rodriguez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Pastor Elmer Jackson,
Yes.
Chair Betsy Lara,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Next, we have Stakeholders Oversight Committee staff requests and communications. Is there anything or any information that any one of my fellow colleagues wishes to request for our next meeting, aside from what we've already settled on?
I like to request again, I see things happening in the city the day after or on Facebook, et cetera. I requested an event schedule from the city. I see groundbreaking things happening. If we knew in advance, maybe we could be there or one of the members can be there and just have an ear to the ground there to see things like, Barnes Park was last weekend. Didn't know about it.
Member Orozco, why didn't you come to the bike ride?
I had my bike ready. I just didn't know about it. But, I'm aware of the mental health walk, et cetera, because it's on the marquee, but, actually having a physical paper and saying, what's happening next week and maybe we can have 3 or 4 members at some of these places, to answer questions. And people ask me all the time, where's the money going, et cetera, we can actually, give them a spiel of where we're at and what we're doing. So if we could get an event schedule, I'd appreciate it.
I want to say RCS now has their calendar on the website. Maria?
Yes, that is correct. It's listed on the city's website as soon as you go in. It has the special events and all of the year special events are listed there. We do have a few that are not listed. So maybe we could do for future events, ensure that you receive an email with the event flyer invitation to make sure that you mark it on your calendars.
Okay.
Just one other thing is I know our night market festivals are coming up, and if that's gonna be something that we're planning on promoting the SOC app, getting community ideas there.
Market? Yeah. June 20th, right? June 20th?
Yes, it's every Thursday, starting June 20th through August 29th, with the exception of 4th of July. And the event is from 5 to 9 p.m. We do begin at Morgan Park, June 20th through July 20, I think it's 29th. And then the whole month of August, it gets relocated to Main Avenue. We could definitely provide a space. I'm not sure if the committee wishes to have its own booth or perhaps joining the RCS booth that we have.
Oh,
Or I know also the city clerk's office has a couple of dates as well.
that's an idea. And
So if you could
Pastor
give us
Jackson, don't you
direction.
request that it be inside of the beer garden either, okay?
Don't worry about that. That's for sure.
I know. Anybody else? No? Okay, so seeing that there isn't anything else, we are going to adjourn this meeting. Our next SOC regular meeting will be on Tuesday, June 11th, 2024 at 5 p.m. So I move that we adjourn this meeting. Can I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. So this meeting is adjourned at 6:56 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Bye, Rose.
Okay. We got a lot of work to do, don't we?
Do you need anything from me? Are you good? No? Are you
That
good?
was really in a hurry.
Everything's good. Yeah, we should be good for tomorrow. I'll do one more review tomorrow morning.
It's in the front.
Oh, no, thank you. Maybe,
Is requesting.
and then like search.
Yeah, I'll respond.
So maybe.
Yeah, so I've always, and I've asked guys to always send us like an email version,
Yes.
because then
I'll remind me.
we can propagate it. Pero ya no nos lo manda el
No te
cabrón.
lo manda, I'll remind you.
And that way we can propagate it.
Okay, I'll.
Sadly for this
And I'm
purpose.
gonna send them a note. Because my would be